Lock finger. Hey everyone, good evening. This is Nevin Gusak, your host of the Patriotic Populist. And with me tonight is Herschell Miller, our co-host. How's it
Good to
going,
be with you.
Herschell?
Oh, it's great, Nevin. Oklahoma has decided to become Canada for a week, but other than that, it's pretty enjoyable right now. When I go back to work Monday, it's supposed to be, I think, -4 is what the weather chap is saying right now. So, yeah, just lovely times. It's so wonderful in our nice little February winter wonderland. Supposed to get like a foot of snow in between here and next Friday. So, just loving it.
Hey, you and the kids, your wife, you can make snow angels in the ground that's that foot or so of snow. So hey, and meanwhile we're in sunny Florida. Walked up and down the stairs today, half an hour. Nice heat, beautiful. It was a little rainy. Skies cleared out. Don't get jealous. Don't go hating on me. It is what it is.
Oh, man, you make
I
me
got
want to
my
move down
Cabernet
there.
wine right here, so I'm chilling.
Yeah, I got the tradesman special right here with me right now. I
For
tell
those
you,
of you who don't know what the tradesman special is, it's good proletarian working class coffee.
I tell you what.
It's the brew. It's the blue collar brew.
Oh, I'll tell you what. I don't know how we managed to do it because every tradesman that I know is probably drinks 3 to 4 large energy drinks a day, eats a copious amount of hot box food from the gas stations, and we're about as far from a well balanced diet as you could possibly get without just totally eating buckets of lard. But we do it because the money is good.
Well, you know something. You know what's also good because my father and passed it on to my brother. They own a rather extremely prosperous business down here in South Florida. And I had worked there. I don't know if you knew this about me. I worked there for a number of years back when I was married to, bring in extra income along with my regular full-time position as a librarian and as assistant branch manager. So they used to have the roach coaches come by. I'm sure you're familiar with
Oh
those.
man. Oh, don't even get started on the roach coaches.
And you could just see it now. They had the Jamaican patties. They had the guava pastries. Because down here there's a big Caribbean population and Hispanic population, so of course they cater to such individuals, such demographics. And then they had the different sandwiches and the other kinds of pastries and a million and one different cold drinks and everything. And look, it's what every growing man needs. It's nutrition packed, it's mobile, and it's cash only, no credit cards. So
I
be
tell you,
sure.
I remember this story. I had a guy that I used to work with tell me this about this roach coach that used to drive out to a factory. The funny thing is because they are technically still regulated by the health department. And I'm using the loosest quotation marks I can because if you've ever seen the inside of a roach coach, they're about as far from ocean or from food safety standards as you can get. But what was funny is that he had this network that was set up around the city with other roach coaches, and that way if the health inspector showed up at this factory over here or this place over there trying to inspect one of them, they would all leave town and scatter. I mean, they literally scattered like roaches at that point.
I could believe it.
And you'd see them, they'd pull back in town, he said, a couple of days later whenever the heat died down. Oh, man.
And I used to have the eggs and the bacon from there sometimes when I would work for my dad. Sometimes I would take a heaping plate of the eggs, the bacon, the sausage. I mean, I'll tell you, it stick to your ribs and it tasted, when it came fresh, it was, I mean, it's not something I'd eat now. And, just be sure you have a handy dandy porcelain throne nearby in your workplace after eating some roach coach.
Oh, man. Uh, I tell you what, that's the little things in life that you always love like that. You know, it's you know, like you said, it's not something that you wake up in the morning like, man, I want to go eat at this very questionable mobile restaurant that's probably run by somebody that's not had a health inspection in 20 years. But my God, I've ate some of the best food in my life there. I can remember there's a shrimp and rice place near my hometown.
Mm-hmm.
It's to die for. It was $10, and they basically filled up one of them portable containers with chicken and rice or shrimp and rice or whatever else you wanted, and it was always perfect.
Oh, that sounds good. That my mouth is now watering. You know what I had tonight? My girlfriend, she got me into this white pizza with garden vegetables on it. Okay, I used to see it, and I said to myself, there is no way I'm eating that. Pizza, you see, I'm from Long Island, New York, where we enjoy our coffee, our pizza, and all the rest of that stuff, okay? Pizza's got to be 110% Italian, pizzeria, tomato sauce, the cheese, got to have some good toppings, all the rest of it, thin crust, none of that deep dish Chicago stuff. No offense to any Chicagoans who will be listening to this broadcast. So she said, why don't you try white pizza? And, as I've gotten older, moved down to South Florida, I've always started to really get into trying different foods from different countries of the world and different cultures. It's a lot of fun. So I tried the white pizza, and it was to die for. I loved it. This garlic crust, light cheese, fresh vegetables, Sal's Pizzeria. They have a location here in Coral Springs, Florida. A little advertising here. Excellent. Wash it down with a Coke, with a chaser of Coke Zero, ice cold. Okay, not warm, cold. Her and I shared this caprese salad. Mwah. It is so good. So those of you who are hating on white pizza, it's not as bad as you think. It's actually very good, very light on the light on the stomach. So it's good to eat at dinner time. The best.
Well,
Okay.
I have to say,
we got to talk about these things because we're all of us are being oppressed by teabaggers and globalists and assaulted by communist forces and Russia and China. You got to talk about the lighter things in life, right?
oh, absolutely. And that reminds me that to all the viewers, this is why when me and Nevin, we're also going to launch this other podcast. It's going to be called The Patriotic Chef. And see, this whole podcast is going to be talking about what real populist patriots eat, the real hearty foods like the stews and the white pizzas and the New York style pizza, because we're not going to have none of them Chicagoans up here ruining the good name of pizza.
Yeah, no offense. And look, Chicagoans, I love you all, like I love all Americans, but pizza like a pie. See, a pie, it's like pecan pie, cherry pie, whatnot. That shit's supposed to be sweet. It's supposed to be dessert. When I have a pizza, you got to fold the crust. You got to fold the fucker and eat it and just taste that Italian flavor on there. Fold that pizza. Fold that shit. So, well, that's what you got to do. I mean, look, Chicagoans, God bless you. Enjoy your pizza. Just not for me.
Well, Nevin,
it is what it is.
I would love to sit here and talk more about food with you, but I do think that we have to talk about some less than favorable news stories tonight that I've come across this week.
No.
I hate it too. Don't worry. One of these days we'll have a lighthearted episode.
It's kind of like, well, I shouldn't say what it's like sometimes, but I almost said it, but that is the purpose of our show.
So as I'm sitting around yesterday, minding my own business and scrolling through Facebook, I come across this picture in a group, and it was a screenshot from another Facebook page that had shared a post fawning over Jill Biden and her cutting out these large hearts for Valentine's Day. And they were talking about how the nation is healing and how proud they was to have a real first lady in the White House. Now, that would have been bad enough by itself. I have to say that's the absolute pandering that most media outlets are going to do for Joe Biden is beyond disgusting. But then I remembered that there are people that actually believe in these websites. This is where it got ugly. So as I scroll through the comments on it, it was just one fawning comment after another about how everything is solved and how the world's going back to normal and how now we have real leaders in this country. And I began to wonder something. I said, what has really changed since Trump has left office? Now, giving Joe Biden the benefit of the doubt that it's only been about, 2 weeks now? A little over 2 weeks maybe since he took office. I'm not exactly certain, but I know it's not been very long. So I'm not expecting the world to be changed. But here's a short list of things that haven't changed since Joe Biden left office. The United States is still involved in military conflicts halfway around the world, which, in me and Nevin's defense, we have argued against most of these involvements for years now, even in our conservative days. And Nevin, I presume even back then you were pretty disillusioned with the long-term conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. We still haven't got our $2,000 stimulus checks. We still have a pandemic spreading across the country. We still have all of these issues that are affecting and mind you, that unemployment is still staggeringly high, almost depression levels. So what I'm trying to say here is that for all this fawning from ABC, CNN, CBS, and every other news outlet over the last several weeks since Joe Biden was elected, it's maybe somehow more disgusting than what they did for Trump. Because for Trump, yeah, they never gave the man a chance, but at least they did bring up some points where he was failing. But now I have this sneaking suspicion stuck in the back of my head that what we're about to witness is another 8 years of the Obama presidency. And what I mean by that is that Obama can do absolutely nothing wrong. Mm-hmm. That every decision that he makes is perfect, and everything that's wrong with this country is the fault of Trump, the Republicans, and the Republican voters. Mm-hmm. And I have to say that's about as disheartened as I have been in a long time, because at least under Trump, I had kind of the belief that, people were paying attention, but now for some reason, people have just assumed that everything is rainbows and sunshines and tomorrow everything goes back to normal. Nevin, what's your take on that?
Well, no, I think it's indicative of a problem that's been around for a long time, and that's hyper-political partisanship, cult of personality. Team A, the Democrats, is flawless. Team B, the Republicans, are unmitigated evil. And then, of course, when a Republican is in power and they have a majority in Congress, then it's the roles are reversed. And that is totally against our worldview, where we take from both elements of the Democratic Party, at least its populist wing, as well as elements within the right wing of the Republican Party, and that's how we come up with patriotic populism. I never was particularly a fan of Biden based on his voting record, which we'll go over right now. I mean, to be honest, I think some of his executive orders have been positive steps in the right direction, but he's not giving us the structural change that we need. And to be honest with you, no president can do everything alone. And, he needs to harness the congressional majorities that he has, albeit barely, to forge together a populist program. But the reality is Biden is an anti-populist. Let's talk about some of his domestic issues that he's voted on. I mean, he voted on key points of deregulation, on the deregulation such as the repeal of Glass-Steagall. He was a big supporter of that. He was a big supporter of the bankruptcy bill that was pushed by President George W. Bush that favored the banks and the creditors as opposed to the consumers. We all saw the damage that the repeal of Glass-Steagall did. And those issues, he joined with the most teabaggerish, globalist, pro-corporate Republicans there are in those efforts to deregulate the big finance investment industry. Joe Biden has supported all the bad trade agreements that has increased the trade deficit and hurt our national security. He was a big proponent of NAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, permanent normal trade relations with Putin's Russia, CAFTA, all the trade agreements, if you will. Joe Biden is a corporate liberal internationalist. There are some of our anti-communist friends claim, oh, he's a radical socialist, like what Vice President Pence and even Trump himself said during the 2020 campaign. It's absolutely no evidence that the man is a socialist or a communist. He's a political opportunist. And if some of his, votes align with the interests of, let's say, a communist dictatorship, well, that's the price of being politics in the business of politics. It furthers his political career. Joe Biden, for example, when you take a look at it, he was known as the senator for MBNA or Senator Credit Card. The guy is not a socialist or a communist. These are nicknames that he earned well into his political career yet many years ago. He's voted more often than not on key issues with big business. On his international issues, he took a pretty anti-Cold War position that was aligned against America's Cold War policy. He voted against the Strategic Defense Initiative, the anti-missile defense system of Reagan. He's been, even after 1991, he has been a staunch critic of missile defense for the United States, even though Russia never dropped its hostility and you have a rising communist China. Joe Biden has opposed our efforts to contain communism in Central America during the 1980s. He also had some sinister aspects of him too. There was a declassified document, a Soviet document, that had notes from, I believe, the head of the International Department of the Communist Party, Soviet Union, Zagladin, and it talked about how Biden was visited the Soviet Union to confer with the Soviet leadership back in 1979 about dissidents. And Biden basically said, we're just going to pretend to do stuff about the dissidents, but we really don't care. So, Biden definitely had a sinister side to him. But really, when you look at it, it's all about Biden. It's not ideology. He basically, is in certain ways the tool of corporate America. So we really shouldn't be surprised that he's really not pushing for a full FDR program. And look, the fact of the matter is he got rid of some of Trump's heinously anti-labor National Labor Relations Board appointees. He did that. He, executive order, which mandated at least $15 minimum wage for government contractors, workers to be paid. There are some good things that Biden has done, but what's really needed is far-reaching change. And one of the biggest mistakes I think he's doing is trying to meet with the Republicans to craft legislation, including COVID, which that fell apart and the $1.9 trillion coronavirus stimulus was passed. But there's really no need to work with the Republicans on domestic policy because their trickle-down economics, their teabagger economics is such a disaster, proven over and over again. There's no reason to do that. What really needs to happen is you need to have a bold populist agenda. And I want to give Joe Biden, just like I supported Trump. I certainly wasn't as enthusiastic about Biden, if at all, but Trump I was enthusiastic enough, willing to give him a chance. Biden, I'm willing to give a chance, but I don't have high expectations for him, to be honest. Look, if he does something right, and I listed certain things he's done right, in my opinion, great, because we like to be fair on this program. But on the other hand, when he does things that are really shitty against the nation and the American people, then I'm going to call him out on it. The stimulus checks are another example. He called for $2,000 stimulus checks. Now the feds have backtracked and said, oh, 1,400. And it's like, this is unbelievable because earlier last year, the federal government under Trump and the teabaggers were saying, well, we got to give these corporations all this money, PPP money, and blah, 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 even though really it was touted as being small business relief. And boom, we have to rush. There was nothing about how do we pay for it. Now, this government, which is fundamentally based on not socialism but teabaggery, is dragging their feet and quibbling on how much money. The people need money now. They're hurting. People can't feed their freaking families. You read the newspapers, there is a freaking food crisis. Lines many miles along in Texas, for example, a red state, by the way. You think the red states are wonderful, by the way. They got problems too. They're not paradise. I mean, you have a food security crisis. What the hell is going on here? What do you think of that, Herschel?
Well, Nevin, what pisses me off the most, and will continue to piss me off the longer this presidency drags out, is the fact that I was promised FDR. It was shouted from the rooftops from most major outlets that Joe Biden would be the most progressive president that we've had since FDR. That he would continue along with FDR. And don't. See, this is the thing about gaslighting that irritates me so much, is because what they're doing when they're gaslighting the American people is that they're acting like you're stupid. That you're so stupid that you are incapable of putting two and two together. Now, if you don't believe me, like Nevin just talked about, Joe Biden did not say $1,400 plus the $600 that already passed. He did not say that. His campaign, Reverend Warnock's campaign, and cannot remember the other candidate's campaign.
Josh Ossoff.
Yeah, Ossoff. They all talked about elect us and we will pass 2,000 stimulus checks now. Mm-hmm. That's exactly the words, and they say, go back and look at the articles yourself. Go back and look at the advertisements. It was $2,000 out the door. There's tweets, there's video evidence. It's there. Don't let them lie to you. If the Democrats, and I'll say this, if the Democrats couldn't get $2,000 checks, it's because they're completely worthless, is what it is. All of the momentum, all the momentum in the country right now was for $2,000 stimulus checks. You even had Donald Trump backing it. You had several Republican senators that were open to it. Most of the Democrats were open for it. The American people overwhelmingly supported $2,000 stimulus checks. I might add there, $2,000 a person would have done wonders for the average financial situation. There were so many people that could have paid off some back debt, could have paid up a little bit money, and that money would have all went back into the economy. Not like when you give tax breaks and that money ends up in a Panamanian bank account or a Bahamian bank account or a Swiss bank account. That money that you give, Joe Blow, the iron worker, goes right back into the economy. It's a bottom-up economy. It's not trickle down. It's not, give the wealth give all of the wealth to the wealthy and hope that they push it back downstream. It's putting money in the hands of people that are affected the most by this pandemic. And it just drives me insane because, by God, we deserve them checks.
It's our money. It's our money.
Yeah, it is our money. And this is another thing I want to tell people. Even if by somehow that you haven't paid $2,000 in taxes yet, you made that money. Your labor, your work, your service to your community, your service to the country if you were in the military. We are the engine that drives this country. Without labor, without the common citizens that wake up every day and go to work and make all the money flow, nothing in this country happens. Not a thing. And that's what irritates me so much is when they get up to Washington and they start standing around acting like, well, oh, good sir, I can't believe that we're asking to spend money on the peasants. And that's how they act. It's peasants. They treat you just like you're some subservient serf class living underneath their feet. But you're not. You are an American citizen, and it is your rights to reach into the Treasury in times of crisis because, by God, the Treasury wouldn't even be there without you. And this is what I'm going to get into later in this show. Trump is gone. The Republican Party and the Democrats have a 50-50 split in the Senate, but Trump is gone. I'm going to get so sick and tired, and I'm already sick and tired of the fact that every criticism that is levied against the Democrats or Joe Biden will be reflected back into Donald Trump, saying, well, he's better than Donald Trump. Well, okay, first of all, yeah, that's probably true. I wasn't a fan of Donald Trump. But let's not sit here and act like Joe Biden's a bed of roses. Joe Biden, it's just, he's going to get away with murder. That's what's going to happen. Joe Biden is going to get away with murder in this presidency, just like Obama did. And it's already driving me insane. Because, by God, Joe Biden is a public servant. He's not a king. He's not there by divine right. He's not there because he's better than you. He is there because he got elected. He is a public servant. His job is to ensure, and elected by the people. He's the only office in the country that is elected by the sum total of all the people in this country. No other office has that distinction. He is supposed to be the most uniting figure in this country, and it is his job. I don't give a shit how old he is, to wake up every morning, get on the phone, and make sure that the shit that gets done now. He needs to get on the phone with people like Joe Manchin from West Virginia and tell him that I will lobby against you with everything I've got. If you don't get on board right now, I will primary you, because I have the power in this party right now to primary you. I am the president. Mm-hmm. Presidents are not dictators. I don't want to make that, I don't want to act like that's true. Presidents cannot pass laws. Presidents cannot change drastic policy in this country outside of their jurisdiction underneath them. Mm-hmm. Presidents are the most important and most universally recognized public figure in the country. At any given time, most people would be lucky to name 10 senators if you ask the average person walking down the street. And I'm not blaming them. I'm not saying people are stupid. I'm saying that most people don't pay that much attention to politics, but everybody knows who the president is. I'm not letting Joe Biden get off scot-free.
No, we shouldn't. We shouldn't, because I also have concerns that Joe Biden is going to end up, his presidency is going to be like Obama 2.0. And the Republicans, if you remember the Tea Party, they kicked his ass in 2010. And that shouldn't have been. There's no reason why those cast of characters should have won office. And there were a lot of different reasons why they did, but the fact of the matter is they shouldn't. And Obama had a unique opportunity to be an ex-FDR. In some ways, he promised the same thing too. I remember that very clearly in 2008, and I voted for Obama once. And then I voted third party in 2012, and then I voted for Trump in 2016, to give you my part of my voting history there. But yeah, so I am deeply concerned about that. Elements of the establishment corporate Democrats, like Joe Manchin, are causing huge problems with the minimum wage issue. They're also causing a huge problem where they're pushing for more, what are you going to call it, means testing to get the stimulus checks. Now it's being lowered to $55,000 is the discussion on that. I mean, $55,000, yeah, maybe in parts of rural Arkansas or Oklahoma, that might be perhaps a fair cap. I mean, I'll leave that up to you to comment if you like. But $55,000 in Broward County down here in Florida, or in one of the 5 boroughs in New York City, $55,000 is a poverty wage, basically.
And that's $55,000 in last year's tax returns, too. I'd like to add that.
Oh, so
that doesn't even take into account what's happened since the damn pandemic started.
That was a project that means testing was not a teabagger Republican thing. That last year, that was actually something that Nancy Pelosi put in. How do you like that? Try that on for size. So if you think, the Democrats as a party as a whole is always a friend of the working man, no. But I will say, I'll give a shout out to Bernie Sanders. By God, he is fighting. Nina Turner, a progressive congressional candidate, is probably going to win in Ohio. And she was a longtime collaborator on Bernie's campaign. She's pushing it back against that. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I know the teabaggers have brain, heart aneurysms and go into shocks and seizures, when they hear her name and speak. But AOC, She's taken our side on that issue, and there are a bunch of things I don't agree with AOC on. I respectfully disagree and firmly. But those people, at least, are voices in the wilderness that are really fighting and pushing back. And the Democratic Party really needs to listen to those people, because otherwise you're going to get another Trump-like figure and an entire new, even worse Republican Party that pretends they're for the working class, and they'll lull voters, with their rhetoric that they care about the workers, and they're just going to wrap up teabagger Reaganite economics in just the rhetoric of the working class, and just, divide poor people against each other. Why? Democrats didn't offer enough to people. They didn't change. You have a political party in this country to be truly successful. You have to profoundly change people's lives. That's how you're going to win the people over. That's how the Democrats achieved legislative majorities for decades, since the 1930s, 1940s, more or less. I mean, even the Republicans were even pushed to accepting the New Deal, by the way, because it was so popular.
Yeah, wasn't it Eisenhower himself said that going after Social Security is political suicide?
Exactly. And it still is in certain ways. They try to hide it, but, still is today. That's one of the reasons why Trump got a lot of support. He promised not to privatize Social Security or lower the age of eligibility even further. Or raise it, excuse me, not lower it, raise it.
Well, Nevin, this is a point that I'd like to interject real quick. Now, this episode, I'm explicitly staying away from the Republican Party because we've spent quite a few episodes now bashing the Republican Party. But I will say this. There is no populism in the Republican Party. Now, there might be populist Republicans. Now, that's up for debate with the scholars, but I'll say that there's a handful of Republicans that I've seen that I'd say are more pro-worker than they are, and then their counterparts. But the Republican Party, by and large, no matter what they tell you, no matter how many times Ted freaking Cruz gets on there claiming to be a populist, they're not. Populism is not tax cuts and deregulation for the ultra-wealthy. Tax cuts is not the defunding of rural schools and communities and trying to consolidate schools into larger districts. Populism is not kissing the asses of the largest mega corporations to make sure that they're happy and well taken care of while you sit at home and lose your house and your livelihood. The Republican Party, they are no friend of mine, and they are no friend of populism. Now, I'll say, like I said, I want to reiterate this to anybody that listens to this that may be a Republican. You may be a Republican that agrees with everything we say, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. What I'm talking about is the national Republican establishment. Mitch McConnell, Ron Johnson, Ted Cruz, Lindsey Graham, these men have never, not at one point in your life, been on the side of workers. And they would probably not be until even long after they're dead.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think we should kind of clarify things. When I use a word, and it is a pejorative, I purposely use it, teabagger. It's not to denigrate every single person that adheres to the Tea Party on an average level. I mean, there are some people who are associated with Tea Party type organizations that are good on certain issues, like Trevor Loudon is very good as probably one of the better scholars. I disagree with him, and I know him personally, and I disagree with him profoundly on many aspects of economics, but he is excellent on the issue of studying domestic as well as our extremist groups, particularly communist and leftist groups. There are Republicans in recent history that are very good, that in some ways are heroes of mine. People like the late Walter Jones, who was a congressman from North Carolina. He supported the restoration of the Glass-Steagall Act. He was against all the unfair trade treaties. He was against the increasing Chinese penetration of the economy. He was against giving PNTR for Vladimir Putin. He was also for overturning Citizens United. So there are good Republicans out there, and I want to make it clear. When we denigrate the Republican Party and criticize the Republican Party and the quote-unquote teabaggers, we're talking about people that are like the Ron Johnsons, the Ronald Reagans, the George W. Bushes, the Scott Walkers, Ted Cruz, people like that. And the Koch brothers and Sheldon Adelson, who recently passed away, and others. Those types of individuals, the social Darwinists, the sociopaths, the politicians, the commentators, the business leaders who lack basic empathy, if you will. And yeah, those are the people that, frankly, I have no respect for. I actually have a degree of extreme dislike towards them that's unquenchable. So that's it. But we're going to be heavily criticizing the Democrats. And there are going to be times where I'm going to be criticizing the progressive Democrats. I'll say quickly, I mean, since we're going to be, giving our view on aspects of Democratic politicians that we disagree with, one of my biggest beefs with the progressive Democrats, for most of them, is their quote anti-imperialism. There are many progressive Democrats that seem to downplay the crimes, aggressive anti-U.S. tendencies of dictatorships and communist dictatorships in Cuba, in Venezuela. And this is one of the things that Trevor Loudon, and I also cover in my books as well, is their connections between elements of the progressive Democrats in Congress with the governments of Venezuela and Cuba, for example. In some cases, China. In the case of Congresswoman Judy Chu from California, is very, very tied in with communist China. Even today, you look at the Biden administration. Of course, Biden is a corporate internationalist, not a progressive Democrat. And he wants to also reinstate the INF treaty. I mean, supposedly he's claiming that Trump was a puppet of Putin, but yet now Biden wants to reinstate the INF treaty, which was being violated by the Russian Federation. In fact, after it was signed by Reagan and Gorbachev in 1987, the Soviets immediately violated it, transferred SS-23 medium-range missiles to their Warsaw Pact allies in contravention of what they were supposed to do. So the bottom line is this is where I disagree. Getting back to I want to throw in a little foreign policy criticism of Biden, but this is my big beef with the progressive Democrats. And when these issues come up, when they're cheerleading or they're kind of downplaying the crimes and the aggressive tendencies of a Maduro or Chavez in Venezuela, or Raul Castro and President Diaz-Canel in Cuba, they're going to get a lot of opprobrium, a lot of criticism from me. So Herschel, great point. I want to make this clear to people. We're not this, just because we're heavily critical of trickle-down Republicans doesn't mean we're leftists or far leftists.
Yeah, I'd have to say I'm probably left to center anymore. I'll say this is because we're being honest. Me and you plan on making a long run out of this, so I might as well be honest with my viewers. I've moved left of center because I've seen what trickle down economics do to my community. I've seen what free market fundamentalism and how it stole jobs away from my communities, and how it destroyed my hometown schools. I've seen how Republicans. And the reason I say Republicans is because that's who runs my state. Mm-hmm. I live in a town of 400 people. Every damn year, the state government led by Republicans talks about consolidating my hometown school into another district. That would kill my hometown. And it's all budgetary reasons, because Oklahoma, even though we have oil companies all over the damn place, cannot seem to find any money. I've seen how this fiscal austerity from the Republican Party and the conservatives and the Democrats, honest to God, since Bill Clinton, I've seen how it just destroys communities. I've seen, when Whirlpool left Fort Smith and took probably, well over 1,000 jobs with it. Mm-hmm. And for what? The price of washing machines didn't go down. No. It wasn't like Whirlpool washing machines or Whirlpool dryers went down any at all. In fact, they went up. But they just started making more money. So I moved left to center. Mm-hmm. Because the way I see it, what lies to the right of us is nothing but the destruction of everything that I hold dear.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't even consider criticism of trickle-down economics as necessarily left-wing. What I view as a toxic form of left-wing politics are the tankies, or the Marxist-Leninist movements, and those on the left that, act as apologists for anti-American dictatorships. I mean, considering where I was, and I used to be very much a free market fundamentalist back when I was younger. And I've moved away from that after seeing the damage wrought to the United States and our national security as a result of that. I would argue that actually free market fundamentalism is actually an anti-conservative force because as I mentioned in my solo monologue podcast, over a week ago, really movement conservatism, Reaganism actually does not achieve conservatism's values of stronger families, a stronger national defense posture, and a sense of self-sufficiency, upward mobility, and entrepreneurialism. And that kind of leads me to, we'll do some Facebook posts here. There was something that I posted, quoted from my book. I posted on my Facebook page from my book, Turning the Page, where I write, other conservatives served as apologists for corporate America's outsourcing of American jobs. Turning Point USA founder and leader Charlie Kirk claimed that, quote, it is easy to say that a business owner is un-American and greedy when he outsources production to a foreign land. However, the problem in outsourcing gets created when the government interferes in the capitalist system and creates impediments to U.S. companies being able to keep in the U.S. in a cost-effective manner. And I write cost-effective manner as code language for lower wages, meager or no employee benefits, and the ability to ignore all environmental and worker safety protections. Kirk reveals himself as a globalist when he wrote, quote, we live in a global economy now where different nations have developed different strengths and capabilities in their economies. Some nations do some things better. When that is the case, it makes good business sense to send work to those nations that do the work more efficiently. In a free market, that's okay, because while we send jobs to one nation, another nation is sending jobs to ours. And a free market is not a winner or loser situation. And that's quoted from my book, Turning the Page. And that citation is from Charlie Kirk and Brent Hamachek's Time for a Turning Point, published by Postal Press in 2016, pages 117, 118. And this gentleman by the name of Stephen Redd commented, it would be helpful if you could come up with a more specific term than conservative. Such people aren't truly conservative. They're profit takers who don't give a shit about their country, imagining that their desire to make money at all costs will serve them well regardless of who is in charge of the country. Well, Stephen Redd is actually correct in his sentiments. It's not a conservative force. But the problem with Stephen's comment is, while he's totally right, the establishment conservatism, which is Reaganism, which dominates conservative orthodoxy, to them, everything is all about garnering as much profit for the so-called job creators as much as possible. It's really what conservatism, really, when it comes down to it, the Ted Cruzes, the Ron Johnsons, you name your Republican politician, that's all they care about. They're all funded by corporate America. They don't care if the jobs are being outsourced. They'll make excuses for big business, like Charlie Kirk does, for their outsourcing of American jobs, the destruction of communities, and everything else. But the fact of the matter is, as I say to Stephen, you got to own up to the fact this is what's called conservative now. Conservatism, as it's existed since at least the 1980s, is all about the enhancement of profit. That is what they term economic freedom. They are property supremacists, to quote the historian Nancy McLean. So you got to own up to it. They are conservative. They are seeking to conserve the economic freedom of private sector oligarchs, their untrammeled power. And that's why.
Circle this back to the Democrats, because I want to make a key point here.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the Republicans now for a couple of minutes, and we've talked about how people like Charlie Kirk, who might as well be modern conservative Inc.'s poster child of a pinchish snob born into wealth who failed his way upwards into a Chandler having his own basically money laundering enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
when Reagan basically, haymakered the Democratic Party. I mean, he fundamentally broke the Democrats. He absolutely destroyed the remnants of the New Deal Democrats with his elections in 1980 and 84.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Clinton is closer to a modern Republican than he is to FDR.
Mm-hmm.
Obama is closer to a modern Republican than they are FDR. But Joe Biden, no matter what CNN tries to gaslight you into believing, is closer to Reagan than he is FDR. See, the thing that the Democrats, what irritates me so bad, and this is why I think I almost hate Democrats more than Republicans. Republicans, I mean, they're sociopaths. The establishments, they are more than happy to destroy my hometown if it means another 4% profit for Whirlpool or any of these other large corporations. They don't care. They'll more than happily sell your kid's future away if it means they get a good, nice kickback.
Mm-hmm.
At least they're what they are. I mean, it's like getting mad at a snake for being a snake. I mean, yeah, it's a snake. You don't like it, but it is what it is. But the thing that just pisses me off to no end about the Democrats, at least when I mean Democrats, same story. I'm talking about the establishment core of Democrats that are in Washington and most of the major governments. They have such a contempt for average workers that they're just as bad. I mean, you've seen it with the pipeline situation. Now, look, I was not opposed to the pipeline being stopped on its route, and I want to tell you, the Keystone Pipeline is still there. They were adding another route through it that would have run across the Ogallala Aquifer, one of the most important aquifers in the United States, and it killed, what was it, 200 permanent jobs, I think, is what it actually killed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, look, I want to say this. Them 7,000 workers that are out of a job, or at least not going to be working on that job, that is a very terrible thing. I don't give a shit. Because what the government should have done is canceled the project, but made the company pay out the bids to the workers that were going to be on there. At least might give them something, because these men were ready to work. These are working class people. They have wives and daughters and sons and house payments, and they have all this. I'm not getting mad at the pipeliners, but by God, when I heard Democrats telling them to just find another job, I damn near come out of my skin.
Well, that actually reminds me of what Hillary Clinton said in 2016. And she's awful candidate. Remember what she said about the coal miners? She's like, well, a lot of people are going to lose jobs, and you'll just have to we'll give you retraining. Well, that's what happened. What's what Bill Clinton, in league with corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans, said when the jobs were getting outsourced. Oh, unemployed factory worker, we'll just move to another town or city, get retrained, and work in some service industry position, if you will, or white collar industry. I mean, that's when you're telling somebody who's worked in an auto plant or a textile mill or a washing machine factory all their life, all of a sudden you got to change skill sets. Well, that's really a shitty thing to do, because nobody's putting those demands on and expectations on the super wealthy that are profiting from all these changes. Why do the little people, the average people like us, have to always bear the brunt of all these, changes and creative destruction and everything else? And yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the pipeline. I mean, I have profound concerns about the pipeline, and I think your idea was correct if you're to cancel the pipeline, and there are valid reasons to do it, you got to pay out to those workers. You got to pay out to, at least, especially to the workers whose jobs are displaced. And, but it's the same, and Thomas Frank, the progressive historian, has really covered this very well. This Democratic Party moved away from the New Deal coalition starting in the 1970s, and it moved into this sort of pro-corporate, technocratic ideology, if you will. It really embraced a lot of the white-collar professionals, Wall Street, the tech companies. By the 1980s, the Democrats were achieving fundraising parity with the most corporate reactionary anti-labor Republicans. In the 1990s, you had elements of the Koch network that was backing the Clinton administration and providing money to corporate Clinton Democrats. So what happened is that you had this, what was known as the Third Way or the New Democrats, that were rather anti-New Deal. I mean, remember, it was Bill Clinton that put the failed welfare reform in cooperation with Newt Gingrich's Congress. Clinton passed NAFTA. Clinton passed PNTR for China. Clinton passed he passed financial deregulation, the repeal of Glass-Steagall, the Commodities Futures Modernization Act, which, deregulated the derivatives industry, credit default swaps and everything else, and, made the casino of Wall Street even more of a casino. And Joe Biden, what concerns me and concerned me throughout the election was Joe Biden was part of that Clinton Democratic policy. That new Democratic policy combined neoconservatism and far left Noam Chomsky foreign policy with really hardcore pro-corporate anti-worker economic policies, maybe a little lighter than Republicans, but almost as hard-edged as the Republicans. I mean, Bill Clinton got away with stuff that even Ronald Reagan didn't push. And Ronald Reagan on economics was mostly pretty bad, to be honest with you, on economics. And Clinton really just continued the Reagan revolution. He also deregulated the media. He expanded on Reagan's repeal of the Fairness Doctrine and other forms of Reagan media deregulation, and Clinton put it on steroids and actually passed the Telecommunications Act, which liberalized further the restrictions on media mergers and acquisitions. So, and I'm glad, we're really talking mostly about the Democrats. And then there are, again, I have to stress, then there are the progressive Democrats. And I mean, you and I are not socialists as commonly understood. I think both of us are, center left on certain economic issues, but we believe in entrepreneurialism in a form of stakeholder capitalism. But by God, with the progressive Democrats, our concern is their anti-imperialism, because even though we're non-interventionists, I have to stress that, saying that the U.S. embargo on Cuba is killing Cuba and the Castro regime, the communist regime, doesn't have any role in this is really not honest, because what happens is the sense of anti-imperialism blinds you to the atrocities of the quote-unquote anti-imperialist leaders throughout the world. They're in denial that these countries like Cuba continue to support international terrorism, that they're in league with Russia and China against American interests and all the rest of it. And, I'll give you an example. It's tragicomic. As Obama was leaving office in January 2017, you had Cuba's annual military parade celebrate the Castro's revolution, which was on January 1st, 1959, when his troops rolled into Havana. So he had special Cuban tropas especiales, their special operation forces. They were marching through Havana in a parade. And they were marching, basically saying, we're going to machine gun Obama and use his skull as hats, if you will. And this is the same Obama that normalized relations with Cuba, that gave Cuba this gravy train, basically, and a victory on the world stage. So this is my problem with progressive Democrats, and Democrats, unfortunately, as a whole. It's a huge problem I have. And this is something that our podcast, we're going to watch very closely.
Well, I think if I had to say, going off of your point, a good point I'd try to make is there can be two bad guys in a room fighting each other. Like, one doesn't have to be good. One doesn't have to be bad. And they don't even have to be bad. It can be, history is complicated and people are even more complicated. Vietnam is always my prime example of why I'm a non-interventionist, is because I believe that for what ever good cause that we might have tried to justify, we screwed it up way too much. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the United States was not willing to do anything. If you're going to fight a war, this is something Clausewitz taught. If you're going to fight a war, you commit to it. You 100% commit to it. If the United States was going to engage in a military action in Vietnam, and I'm just saying if they had the justified reason for it, then they are supposed to do it to win. Same thing in Iraq and Afghanistan. Our boys have been over there for 20 years, and for what? The place is not a more stable region. The place is not better off than we got there. But what I'm not saying is this. The leaders that we fought against, like Ho Chi Minh or his top general, I can't ever remember his name. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, General Vo Nguyen Giap. That was his top general.
Or Saddam Hussein, or the various Taliban leaders in Afghanistan. I'm not saying them people are good either, because they're not. They were all monsters. You can make that justification that the United States didn't have to topple Saddam, and I mean, I could see both sides of that argument. I don't care so much about it. The point is that once we got there and once we toppled Saddam, the place is probably more unstable and more of a breeder of terror now than it was then. Because we don't have a plan. We go into these places like that. If we were going there for a strategic military operation to do this, and go home, then that's different. But linger around somewhere for 20 years and just sit there for no reason, other than, I guess, to waste billions in taxpayer dollars every year. I don't know, Nevin. It's the thing that gives me the most conflict.
No, I totally agree with you. I think we have to steer a middle course, basically. I think, engagement with anti-American dictatorships has not worked. It's not made them friendlier. I'll read what the troops in Cuba chanted. In January 2017, Commander-in-Chief, command us, command over this landing, meaning Raul Castro. We are going to make war if imperialism comes. Obama, with what fervor we'd like to confront your clumsiness, give you a cleansing with rebels and mortar, and make you a hat out of bullets to the head. So, I mean, it's very violent, and Obama was the one who engaged them. Clearly, engagement doesn't work. It didn't make them any friendlier. However, on the other hand, and this is something that also is a sort of bipartisan consensus on neoconservative hyper-interventionism around the globe, is we go in, we overthrow Saddam, who was a regional threat as I've talked about on other shows. But what has that given us? It's given us more Iranian influence. It's given misconduct by selected elements of the American armed forces, and as well also the development of a rather corrupt government in Iraq too as well, and everything else. I mean, there's a lot of tremendous mistakes and crimes and everything else. So both sides are correct on the issue. This is why we have to continue to use trade sanctions, trade bans, embargoes, supporting legitimate democratic resistance forces within those countries, but to send troops into countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, when Trump was making noises about possibly sending troops to go into Iran and overthrow the government. I mean, for the record, I'm against American invasions of countries like Iran and Venezuela or Cuba, for example. Number one, because that is involving, you have to think about, of course, the massive casualties that could potentially result from the conflict itself. And then B, you also have to think of the loss of national treasure in this country. I mean, we've been in Iraq and Afghanistan for over 20 years. It's cost us at least, I think, $6 trillion, money that could have been used for a national health insurance program, could have been expanded anti-missile defense to guard against Russian and Chinese missiles. The list is endless. More programs of housing assistance for the middle and working class people to lower homelessness. I mean, on it goes. And unfortunately, one segue into Biden, it looks like Biden now is actually not planning to get out of Iraq anytime soon.
Oh yeah.
That's been in the that's been in the news, and that was very disheartening to read that. But color me surprised, no. I mean, Biden voted for the coalition invasion of Iraq in 2003. He voted for a lot of these highly neoconservative interventionist conflicts. As well as he supported failed engagements too, as well. So that's another disappointment of the Biden administration.
You know what pisses me off the worst, Nevin, about all this? Because first of all, most of these people that are volunteering our best and brightest to go die in the Middle East, men who dedicated their lives to serving the country. And I'm not even going to say Rose Code. Look, soldiers join the military for all kinds of reasons, from actual patriotism to just paying off debt. But the point is they're still our damn soldiers. There are, sons and daughters that die over there in these foreign wars halfway around the world. When people like Mitch McConnell and people like Joe Biden, they're never going to be over there. They're never going to know what it's like to get mortared. They're never going to know what it's like to actually be shot at. What pisses me off, though, is that Joe Biden, he prides himself, or the cabinet has prided itself on all of this inclusion, all of this intersectionality that is just the most progressive cabinet in history, the people around him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, wouldn't you know, with the most progressive cabinet.
That's highly questionable in certain respects.
Oh, absolutely. It's complete bullshit. But, they pride themselves on having the most woman representation, the most people of color representation, but we're still doing the same shit we were doing before with prettier faces to do it with. And right. That's what pisses me off. Because, and this is, again, why I say that I almost hate Democrats more than Republicans, because Democrats, they are such grandstanders. They're such self-righteous hypocrites about this stuff. They want to run around and act like they're just better than you because they, put a few women in power that are going to do the same shit that Bill Kristol and John Bolton would do? Am I supposed to be impressed by your intersectionality?
Well, what's even worse is that the Democratic Party, to give you an idea, the convention that they had, socially distanced, and that I don't care about, but the convention that they had, the lineup of convention speakers that they had or were planning on having, John Kasich, Governor Snyder, former Governor Snyder of Michigan, the man who covered up criminal negligence, the Flint water crisis, and they included him in the big tent of the party. That's the Joe Biden Democratic Party. The Lincoln Project people, their policies are identical to many aspects to that of Trump. Tax cuts for the rich, deregulation, all the rest of it. And the Democratic Party is basically sort of snubbed the progressive populists of Bernie Sanders and whatnot. And instead, they gave the Lincoln Project folks and people like Snyder and Kasich more credibility. They gave them more of a front and center exposure. This is really, the Democratic Party in many ways is degenerated on a three-way pronged approach. They have a little bit of neoconservative hyper-interventionism. They have engagement with America's enemies. Then they have an economic policy that really is in many ways sort of trickle-down economics light, and globalism too, very similar to many in the Republican Party. And this is where people like Jimmy Dore and Kyle Kulinski are correct. They'll have this rainbow flag, no disrespect to LGBTQ people personally, because our coalition is multi-gender, multiracial, the whole nine yards, but buying that rainbow flag and the smiley face flags is really more of the same, which isn't good.
Well, I think our good friend of ours, he said it best the other day. He said it's bloody imperialism wrapped up in a pride flag.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Yeah,
but this is the thing, and I want to make a distinction real quick because I know that there's some sensitive person that's going to watch this. When we say globalism, we're not talking about obviously Nevin is very Jewish. So first of all, just cut the idea out of your head. We're not talking about some elite conspiracy of Jewish bankers bent on taking over the world when we say globalism. We're simply talking about cold, hard cash. We're talking about mega corporations that want to connect all the world's trade together to make sure that they never have to pay for workers and they can always avoid taxes. That's what we mean when we say globalism. We're not talking about the JQ or some other conspiracy theory.
Exactly.
I just wanted to make that clear, Nevin, because I knew that somebody's going to see this eventually and get all offended by it, thinking that we're some type of white
I'll throw it out there. Not only am I Jewish, but I'm also a Jewish guy who is in a serious relationship with a woman originally from the Dominican Republic, a bit of a tan-skinned, dark-skinned Dominican Republic woman. So, I mean, you know, the fact of the matter is I live the woke walk, so to speak. I really do. But look, I have pride in my country. I want my country, our country, to succeed. And, you know, when I mean globalism, I mean basically policies that compromise the independence of the United States. And I see the most perniciously evil, harmful form of globalism that reigns supreme in the United States is that of corporate-driven economic globalism. It's nothing to there are plenty of Jews that are on the right side in this fight, so to speak. You have people like you know, Diana West. I mean, she's very conservative. She's Jewish, but she's against the unfettered free trade treaties and its harm on our prosperity and national security. She's one of the early supporters of Trump based on that issue, amongst others. You have Alan Tonelson, formerly of the U.S. Business and Industry Council. Give him a plug. He has a blog called Reality Check. He's a hardcore nationalist, and he's Jewish, New York Jew, as a matter of fact. I met him personally once. Great guy. You know, you have a Jewish American business hero of mine, Aaron Feuerstein, who's now deceased, owned Malden Mills in Massachusetts. Huge textile company, corporation. He's very good to his workers, very patriotic. The guy was as Jewish as a matzo ball. You know, so, you know, the thing is again, this is one of the idiocies of racism. And I mean, if you see my interviews with Rudolph Barasech, and I love Rudolph on a lot of issues, but, you know, he is caught up on the Jewish thing. There's nothing in the Jewish ethnic group, religion, or anything that's programmed into our DNA to make us a bunch of believers in rapacious Wall Street capitalism. You know, I'm Jewish, and there are things that, frankly, I hate about Ben Shapiro and the guy, I forget his name, who raped Sydney, Nebraska. That's this private equity guy who's a big Republican donor. I forget the Paul Singer, Jewish guy. But, you know, whether they're Jewish or non-Jewish, it's irrelevant. Their religion is basically profit at all costs. And Shapiro, in my opinion, is a bit of a grifter. It's nothing to do with their Judaism. As a Jew, I'm outraged by that. I love our country. You know, I mean, look, there are Jewish business people in Israel that sell out Israel. I mean, my book, Turning the Page, you talk about Shaul Eisenberg and other Israeli Jewish tycoons that are selling military equipment to the Red Chinese, whose enhancements of Israeli technology finds its way in Chinese weapons systems sold to the Saudis, the Iranians, and Saddam Hussein's Iraq. It's nothing to do with Jewish. And you know, this brings me on a key point. Racism, including anti-Semitism and racism, and I know the white nationalists, socialists will get pissed at us, but fuck them. But it's bullshit. Racism is bullshit because you get different political opinions and priorities within each racial group. There's no such thing as a monolithic value system within the Jewish community, the Black community, Hispanic community. And if you don't believe me, why don't you frickin' talk to them or listen in their conversations or pick up a fucking book, okay? You know,
that's what it is. It's easy to characterize an entire group of people than it is to actually get down and understand it. People are complicated. Life is complicated, and anytime you try to go making these broad generalized statements about anybody, you're bound to be wrong. Like you said, there's obviously examples of Jewish men throughout history who have fit the bill of what we would term the JQ. But for every one of them, there's one of you, a guy that's sitting here because he loves his country, because he loves his countrymen, because he loves his workers. And it just irritates me to no end. Because racism, what pisses me off as a populist about racism is I have a hell of a lot more common with some poor black kid from Memphis than I do some rich white urbanite from the Hamptons. You have a lot more common with some Mexican immigrant working the fields in Texas than you do the Koch brothers. And this is what populism is about. It's about working class, because by God, we chew the same dirt, we eat the same shit, and we have the same problems. It's always funny to me. I think it was a Sunday or Saturday Night Live sketch. Now, I don't like Saturday Night Live because for a lot of it, they got so political with it that it was just not funny anymore. And if you're going to be political, this is the thing. I'm going to give everybody up-and-coming comedians a little life advice. Politics is funny. Will Ferrell's impersonations of George W. Bush are literal comic gold. It was one of my favorite things seeing growing up. But he was funny. Alec Baldwin's weird, long-running Trump gag, it never was funny. There was never a point that it was funny to basically anybody that wasn't trying to cash in some cheap, points. But it drives me insane that, I don't know.
Well, there's also a lot of bad history with racism in all forms too, but obviously, so quote, white supremacy, throughout the world. There's a bloody history. There's a history of atrocities and authoritarianism it's just so repugnant. And, there's really not much else to say about it. It's like, how can any rational person not oppose the reality of racist forms of totalitarianism and genocide? It's like really kind of baffling and pretty awful that we even have to feel the need to address this. But the fact of the matter it isn't going away so quickly. I think things have gotten better in this country, but racialism is still alive and well. It's still a problem, and it needs to be quelled through education and through a positive form of civic nationalism as much as possible. One thing about Will Ferrell and comedy, I say this to the listeners. If you have not seen this movie with Will Ferrell, it is one of the best political movies. It gives you the reality in a comic form of American politics today. And that is the movie with Will Ferrell called The Campaign. You have to see that movie. It is funny.
Oh, that was Will Ferrell and Zach Galifianakis, wasn't it? The guy that was on The Hangover. Wasn't it like that small town and somewhere? I don't know if it was in
North Carolina was supposed to take place.
Yeah, and I vouch for Nevin here. Comic gold. But this was the thing I was going to say about Saturday Night Live. There was an episode. It was Black Jeopardy was the skit they were doing, and they had Tom Hanks on there. And Tom Hanks showed up on the show. I think this was like late or early 2017. He was on the show in his denim jacket and his MAGA hat, really impersonating a Southerner. But what was funny about it is the whole skit was about how, poor Southerners and black folks are mostly alike. It's such a weird thing when I listen to people and they talk about how they grew up, and this is people from all walks of life. This is people that grew up, Mexican immigrants from California or Asian immigrants in Minnesota, or black kids in Albany, Georgia, or somewhere like that. If you grow up poor, if you grew up in the middle class, if you grow up with your parents earning a real living, you probably grew up pretty similar to each other. A lot of us have the same problems. Our schools are never funded enough. Our parents are never making enough money. There's never enough opportunities for everybody, and nobody likes to graduate high school. At least a couple of years when you look back at it. So what I'm trying to get to, though, is that racism, and I'll say this right now, and this is not me trying to cash in some kind of cheap-ass points with the left, because I don't care. I don't care about if they like me or not, because they won't like me for one reason or another. But racism has no place in populist movements. Populism is and will always remain about the unified politics of the working class. And that's all there is to that. If you're some ethno-nationalist hiding in the shadows thinking you can grift onto this movement and I find out about it, I'll kick your ass out. I've got no room for it and I've got no place for it, and I'm not debating you. I'm not giving you a voice. You can more than welcome listen to us and I hope that you get de-radicalized. But this movement that we're trying to put together, this coalition that's trying to grow right now, it's everybody included. And that's just all there is to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's kind of a no-brainer for people like us, because we are, we are racially tolerant, if you will. I mean, as I like to joke right now, I live a woke life, if you will, in a weird way of putting it. So, I mean, and what repels me of racism, it's just against my own nature, my own personal values. It's against the values that my daughter and her mother raised. My daughter's mother and I have raised our daughter with, and and also the bloody history associated with racial totalitarianism and racial oppression. And to pick up your point on populism, I mean, the populist movement, even in the South, was multiracial. Back in the late 1800s and into the early 1900s, it was multiracial. And what happened is you had the reactionary Bourbon Democrats that used race to split apart the populist movement because it was a bit of a threat. And that's something that even Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. even talked about in one of his speeches, as a matter of fact, which I posted many, many, many months ago on my personal Facebook page. So, yeah, our populist movement, as I told even Herschel in a phone conversation offline, is going to be multiracial. You're going to have multi-genders. You're going to have Christians. You're going to have Jews. You're probably going to have non-religious people. You're probably going to have LGBTQ people that'll join. You'll probably have straight people joining. We're going to be united by a love for our country, a love for the betterment of the United States of America, both economically, militarily, and socially and politically. And we also have love for each other. It's a national community. Our movement is based on love, if you will. In America, I mean, like it or not, it's a mixed demographic country. It's always been that way. I mean, I know this is a cliche, but we are a nation of immigrants. Almost everybody has come to this country from somewhere else. It's just the way it is. It is what it is. So now this is something we have to work with. And I have more in common with, my building is lower middle class and working class, and the community around me, a lot of Hispanics, a lot of African Americans, black people, whatever you want to call them, white people. But I got to tell you, I relate with them more than I do with somebody who is a hedge fund investor. Not to say they're not good hedge fund investors, but I got to tell you, I relate with these people in my building better. I mean, they got bills to pay, they got families. Few of them are divorced fathers like I am, families to take care of, jobs to go to. I mean, and I have 2 master's degree, a double major, a BA, bunch of books published under my belt, tons of interviews, but yet highly educated. I feel I have more in common with folks like Herschel, people in my building, average workers. It's just a sensibility. Real salt of the earth people. That's what it comes down to.
Nevin, that's the thing right there that I'm hoping that we can really get people connected with. Because, I understand right now trying to act like we're a movement or something like that. A lot of people would say that that's a little optimistic. But I have faith. I really do. Because I look around and I think of what I'm trying to do here. And I'm not trying to do something radical. People have done it before. It's just simply standing around and saying that if the working class sticks together, we all win. That, if if we can get together the people, if we can get our voice out, if we can convince people to our cause, we can make a difference. And I have to have faith that there's a lot of other people out there that don't think they can, but I want to encourage people that you can. Me and Nevin, we're not anything special. I'm a hillbilly from southeast Oklahoma with no formal education to speak of other than a year of college. And I emphasize 1 year. I'm not special. Nevin, he's got all kinds of educational accolades behind his belt, but he's not. And I'm not by any means saying this in the wrong way. You're not a Nobel Peace Prize winner.
No.
That's, we're average people.
I'm just an average Joe, to be honest.
And that's what I'm trying to get across to these people. And this is why I'm trying to encourage people into joining this cause. Is every person makes a difference. Every single person. If you're a truck driver, if you're a pipeliner, if you're a nurse, if you're a doctor, if you're a high school teacher, if you've got, experience in programming, if you've got experience in graphic design, there's all kinds of ways that you can help make a difference around you. And that's why I'm trying to give this encouraging part here, is because I know that right now everything looks bleak and everything looks dark. This country, it's on pretty rough terms right now, and I think everybody can see that.
Mm-hmm. I think that's perfectly said. To be honest with you, I almost want to conclude on that point. Believe it or not, our show is we're over an hour already. So, we're doing real, I think this has been a great show. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think we've covered our criticisms of the left, of the Democratic Party. We continued some of our criticisms of the right, but we really wanted to give a little bit of our views on the incoming Biden administration and really the major issues that are afflicting the Democratic Party right now. And, look, Kyle Kulinski, who is a progressive populist, YouTuber, commentator, and he's very good at what he does. And he said on several occasions for 2 years he was talking to himself. And then after, being noticed by people, I suppose, he experienced an uptick in viewers. People like the Young Turks and other podcasters and progressive populist shows noticed him. And now Kyle Kulinski is a major force within the progressive populist movement. He's a mover and a shaker. Will that be us? I don't know. But, look, our populist, patriotic populist Facebook page, thanks to the hard work that Herschell has put in with the different memes, blurbs, has experienced within the past month, according to the report, about at least 33 people joining within the past month. Something's got to be said about that. We have our YouTube channel. Herschell has made some valuable connections, within some populist personalities. I've got a list of some people that would like to be guests on the show, people that I've known since high school who are accomplished professionals but are politically very active. There was a guy who I was talking to, I don't know if anything will come of it, but he's a former TPUSA mid-level staffer. So, and I mentioned the podcast to him and he's interested. I don't know if it will pan out or not. But here we're making, accomplishments, and Rome wasn't built in a day. And, look, Herschell and I started as political friends. We met on Facebook. Would talk on the phone a lot and talk about politics, history. That was one of the big things we had in common. But now we put our conversations in our chats. Him and I figured, why not? What we talk about offline, we might as well just televise it, so to speak, like what we're doing now. And even if we reach a couple of people, that's a couple of more people that we would reach we wouldn't have reached had we not done anything and taken the action to develop these broadcasts and for Herschell to develop the Patriotic Populist page. So I just say, great job, Herschell. Let's just, don't lose faith. Again, Kyle Kulinski talked to himself for 2 years. Then all of a sudden, boom, You know, he increased his number of subscribers and his exposures. And that pretty much sums up what I have to say. I mean, we said a lot about politics, so I wanted to put in a little personal note of encouragement.
Well, Nevin, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think that we've accomplished a lot of what we set out to do tonight, and I look forward to the next time we get to talk.
Sounds good to me. I look forward to next weekend's show.
Thank you, Nevin.